It was like everything slowed down. I saw the gun. I saw him pulling it out, .357 Magnum. The trigger being pulled, getting shot in my shoulder, in my neck, in my hand. I was told I would never walk again. I just started asking God, why me? I was born out of wedlock to teenage parents. My mother and my father was unable to provide for me, and my grandmother stepped in to raise me and her 12 other children. At the age of 7, my grandmother became ill, and I was removed from her custody and placed in foster care. And that's when my life for the next 10 years went on a pretty challenging journey.
And welcome to Family Life Today. Thanks for joining us. We are recording today's program live in front of the largest studio audience we have ever had for a Family Life Today program at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in Chicago. That's the cue for the raucous applause. All right, that's what I'm looking for. Little bigger crowd than at the first summit down in the conference room in our offices back 10 years ago, right?
There were 38 of us at that first event, and the cool thing about this is I'm looking out over the audience. There's 35 countries represented here this year. Really is. And the thing that encourages me about this audience here is they have found what Barbara and I have found, that when you go near the orphan, you go near the heart of God.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the greatest privileges of our lives to go near the heart of an orphan, one that we adopted, but also to come alongside Jed and his team and the great leadership he's providing for the Alliance.
Well, why don't you introduce our guest on today's program?
You know, we have Tyrone Flowers joining us on Family Life today. Tyrone, welcome to the broadcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We got to tell you, Tyrone said that he's been called Tyrone Powers all his life.
Yeah,
he does not look like that actor from the 50s, do you think?
I don't think he does.
Just a little difference.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience has no idea what
Who
you're
we're
talking about.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tyrone, I want you all to know, is a hero. He and his wife, Renee, have been married over 17 years, lives near Kansas City, and gives leadership to a ministry called Higher Impact. And there's a way that he got into that, and it really illustrates Romans 8:28, that all things do work together to those who love God.
That's right.
And to those who are called according to his purpose. Tyrone, you had quite an upbringing. In fact, I'm going to just cut to the chase. Okay. At the age of 6, you got high.
Yes.
Share with our audience how that occurred.
Well, when you're young, and unfortunately, the day I was born, my mother made it very clear she didn't want to be a mother. So thank God my grandmother stepped in and raised me with her 12 other children. And when you're raised with a bunch of teenagers, they experimented with a lot of things, drugs, sex, and alcohol. And at an early age, they got me high and exposed me to those things.
Amazing. When there aren't parents protecting a child, they really are vulnerable to all kinds of things. Your grandmother actually helped raise you.
Yes.
But she became sick at the age of 7?
Yes.
And that really was a game changer for you as well.
Yes. Well, prior to my grandmother's illness, my world was just my small community, and I thought that was it. But when my grandmother became ill, I was removed from my home, and that's when I was placed in foster care. From the age of 7 through 10, I went through 3 different foster homes. And at the time, I really didn't understand what was going on because I had a large family, and I didn't understand why can't I live with one of my relatives. But my simple way of dealing with it was I just told myself, oh, well, when you turn 7, I guess you move out. So,
the thing that I want to just emphasize here, because we have a daughter who she and her husband have 5 5 children, 5 boys, and she's now cared for 20 foster care children over the past half dozen years. And I think what we don't realize many times is how a good, godly foster care family can make a difference in a boy's life. You did not have that kind of foster care experience.
No. I just want to make it very clear, I truly believe in the foster care system and that they're doing great work. But my experience wasn't the greatest. When I came into the first foster home, it's kind of like a pecking order, the last kid in. Sometimes don't get the best service. And I can recall experiences and getting into it with some of the kids that's been in there longer than me. Part of the punishment from my foster parents was placing me in a basement overnight. And it wasn't like a finished basement with carpet and all those amenities. It was concrete, cobwebs, and cold. And I can remember vividly sitting at the top of the steps, just banging on the door, just begging for them to let me out and trying to negotiate whatever terms, just for them to give me another chance.
As you hear that described, and as you said, we're advocates for the foster care system.
Absolutely.
But it really does mean that more people who love and care and are willing to sacrifice need to step in and provide homes for kids like Tyrone who are vulnerable, right?
The church.
Amen.
The church is the only institution globally that is large enough to address the needs of orphans.
Yeah.
And I think it is a ready-made opportunity for the body of Christ to lock arms together and engage in the lives of boys and girls to make an impact in their lives.
And Tyrone, I'm curious because your home environment was not a great environment.
No.
Your foster care environment was not a great environment. As you look back on that, if you could have picked one or the other, foster care or being with your brothers and sisters who were, again, it wasn't a great situation, which would you have picked?
I probably would have chose home in a sense that even though we had limited resources and things was kind of challenging, one thing I knew, my family loved me, but they just didn't have the means to support me. And sometimes it's hard to teach a kid the right way to go when they don't know themselves. So at least I felt the love at home, even though I didn't have the proper direction. And sometimes at that age, you don't even know what's right in order to anticipate that. So
that's really a hallmark of your story, is the profound power of simple acts of love.
Yes.
In the life of a child. You experienced some of those. In fact, you had some experiences that landed you in juvie.
Yes.
And there was a woman in the juvie system who you still smile about her when you think about her, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about her.
Well, one thing, like I said, once I was placed in the foster care system, you become very angry, and there's several ways you can deal with anger. You can take it out on others, yourself, or destroy property. And I was one of those angry kids. So after I went to the 3 foster homes, went to the residential treatment facility, I landed in the juvenile family court. And I can recall Miss Collins. She was a cook. And I was just going through the meal line, and one day she just looked at me and said, "You remind me of my son." And when she said those words, she don't realize the impact she had on my life. Because when she said that, on the inside, here was this beautiful African-American woman. I instantly said, if I remind her of her son, then she could be my mother. And so from that day on, she was my mother, and she didn't know it.
You recently contacted her, and you carried something with you as a memento as you grew up from her?
Well, ever since then, if you add up all the time we spent together, our interaction, it was less than 24 hours because it was only when I was going through the meal line. And the only way I could say thank you to her without saying thank you was I made her a jewelry box in wood shop, and I put her name on it. And so I went to the meal line and I gave that to her. And that was the last time I saw her. And about 20 years later, I ran into her son, and he looked at me and said, "Are you Tyrone Flowers?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I want you to know that you're my mother's favorite son." And it was really interesting because at that moment, it made me feel good, and he gave me her number. And she was living in Wisconsin, and I gave her a call. I said, "Miss Collins, do you know what this is?" And she said, yes, it's Tyrone Flowers. And the first thing she said was, do you know what's sitting on my dresser? And I said, that jewelry box. And she said, yes. And so, long story short, when Miss Collins expressed the needs that her family had and the things she wanted to do for her son, at first I was mad at her family because I thought they would burden her and making her provide for her children. But she did it with a smile. And the thing I took away from that was, anytime you're working with the kids we choose to work with, we need to make it abundantly clear that they are not a burden, no matter what the challenge is. So with the kids I work with, that's one thing I express, no matter how challenging it is, you are not a burden. And Ms. Collins gave me that.
There was also a man that made a similar impact in your life, Mr. Joyner.
Mr. Joyner.
Tell him about how you engaged with him.
Well, Mr. Joyner kind of caught me at an early age. And in my community, sometimes one meal a day was considered a good day. And every time I would knock on Mr. Joyner's door and I asked for food, he would sit me down and feed me. Now, this was a painful experience because I was just wanting to grab some food and leave. But he'd make me go wash my hands, come sit at the table, then he'd put some drink in front of me, a salad, and ask me a whole bunch of questions. And I'm frustrated because I just wanted to leave. But at the same time, on the inside, it felt something in me said, this is right. And I can recall telling myself, when I get older, I want to do this for me and my family. So we would have that meal, and that was that. But anytime I asked Mr. Joyner for money, he would put me to work. And in the early 70s, all I wanted was a quarter or a dollar. He would put me to work. And so I never had a problem with work and compensation. But one thing happened. I was working for $1 one day, and ice cream truck came by. He asked me if I wanted some ice cream. Yes. We had a Kodak moment. And after that, continuing to work, he only gave me 75 cents. And I thought at that time he was cheating me, because one thing about working with kids that come from my background, you got a strong sense of justice and fairness, and you're willing to throw away sometimes quality relationships when you feel that you're being done wrong. So in order to compensate, I broke out all the windows in his house. And then I thought we were going to be even, but that wasn't the case. But during this process, I wanted to heal our relationship, but I didn't know how to say I'm sorry. I thought that was weak, and I didn't know how to say it. The only way I could say I was sorry was by working with him to pay for it, and he gave me that opportunity. So the lesson I took away from that was, sometimes in working with kids, they say they're sorry through their actions and through that relationship. Yeah. And from that point on, Mr. Joyner has always been in my life. When I graduated from community college, he was there. When I met my wife, I introduced him to her. Graduated from law school, undergrad and law school. And he always gave me the same gift, a card and $5.
You did what a lot of kids do in their teenage years. You made basketball your escape.
Yes.
You're 6'4". You had 3 offers to play college ball, graduating from high school, but an event changed the course, not only of your life, but ultimately your eternal destiny. Share what happened.
Well, after going through all the juvenile facilities, only thing that people saw in me, because I've never successfully completed one program, any of the programs I was in. So they kind of gave up on me and sent me home, 6'4", 230 pounds, and all they saw in me was basketball. So I played basketball, had those scholarships offered, but the sad part about it was I didn't know what a scholarship was. And so I turned all 3 of the scholarships down, because no one in my family ever graduated from college, and I never set foot on a college campus. I was more comfortable going to jail than I was going to college. And so I turned those scholarships down, and I decided to go to the Army, because I was used to people telling me what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And I figured now at least I'll be getting paid. And I was influenced by 2 movies, Officer and a Gentleman in Stripes. Once, because you think about it, 2 individuals, knuckleheads, decided to use services as their way out. And I thought maybe if they did it, I can do it too. And I remember vividly the scene between Lou Gossett Jr. and Richard Gere when he had messed up, lost his home visit because he was doing something he wasn't supposed to do. And it was that scene where he was spreading water in his face, And he basically gave up on him and said, get out. And Richard Gere said, don't you do this, don't you do this. I have no place to go. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, tears rolling down my face, because I never had a plan B. And so when they bonded and he ended up being successful, that's when it really gave me hope that if I can make it through the service, then maybe I can be successful.
Did you get into the Army?
Well, I passed a written and physical exam to make it into the service. And the next day, I got on a bus to go celebrate with one of my friends. Well, on the bus was my starting point guard on my basketball team. And we had gotten into a verbal confrontation. And I thought we're going to get off the bus and potentially get in a fist fight or get in an argument. And that's when he pulled out the .357 Magnum and shot me 3 times.
You ended up being paralyzed, obviously.
Yes.
Your basketball career was over. You were filled with rage, bitterness, trying to think how you could get back at him. And in the midst of that, somebody invited you to go to church.
Yes. Well, one thing about getting shot, those 3 bullets wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. The worst thing that happened to me growing up was not having adults that believe in me. Hearing people, because of my background, my last name, or the color of my skin. Every time I walk up to someone and tell them I want to be a doctor, lawyer, or anything I saw on TV, a police officer, they would always tell me I couldn't do those things. So here I am now in a wheelchair and with really no direction with this anger and rage. That was my goal, to either kill him or put him in a wheelchair. But I had a lot of questions as far as why me? As far as why did I have to get shot this way? Because being a young African-American male, everybody assumed it was drug or gang related. And I grew up religious. You know, I didn't have no personal relationship with Christ, but I knew God. So I kind of went to him to ask him that question. Basically, if you don't accept me, there's another place for you to go, and that's eternity in hell. And you got another shot at this. So in the process, and part of the salvation is forgiveness. And I was the type of person that I wanted to get this guy back. So I figured I'd get him first, then God can forgive the both of us. But as you know, we can't work things out in our own timing. We got to do it in God's timing. So I was fortunate that God gave me enough strength to forgive the guy that shot me.
In fact, you went to a pastor and said, I want to become a Christian, and he wouldn't pray with you, right? No,
and that's what shocked me, because being in a wheelchair, you're kind of like a target. You know, everybody want to zoom right in on you. Silver and gold, I have none. Lord, I have Jesus, rise up and walk, you know. But my pastor, in that moment, first thing he asked me was, did you forgive him? And I thought that was strange. And then when I said no, and I thought it was a dumb question too at the time, and then he said, okay. And then he prayed for me and he said, send him back to his seat. And that's when I knew that was a true man of God, because he knew no matter my circumstances, you still have to do it God's way. And so eventually, again, got the strength to forgive the guy that shot me.
There were 2 things happened at church. Obviously, you met Christ.
Yes.
But you also saw real men.
Yes.
For the first time in your life, you had a glimpse of how God takes a broken man and turns him into a real man.
Yes. And that was a huge impact, because normally my experience with men in church were either they were a lot older and it seemed like they didn't live the best part of their lives, and now they're serving God, or it was something wrong, obviously wrong. They were down and out. But these young men I was seeing, you can see that they could be successful in the world if they choose to use their talent. And I never forget, I was there waiting on my ride, and one of the ushers came out with his wife and his 3 children, pulled the car up, and they all got into the car. And that was the first time I saw a family, an African-American family, intact. And in my mind, I was saying, when I grow up, I want that to be me, and taking my family to church.
You got set on a new course. You who weren't going to amount to anything wound up in community college, right?
Yes.
From there?
Yes. Ended up going to a community college, because at this point I realized I couldn't use my mind to be successful. And at this point I only had 5 goals in life. I wanted a house that had heat in the winter, because I was tired of going to bed with my clothes on with socks on your hand. I wanted a house with air in the summer. If you ever experienced triple-digit heat, it's miserable. and a house with no rats, no roaches, and reliable transportation. And so I figured if I go to this community college, everybody was stressing the importance of education. Maybe I have an opportunity to get those 5 things. And so I would drive 5 miles each way in my wheelchair. And I saw something again I'd never seen in my life. It was an African-American man making money using his mind. And again, when I saw that, it gave me hope that maybe I can be successful.
You went from community college to law school.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Graduated from law school.
Yes, sir.
But there was something in your heart that kept pointing you back to the childhood you had, and instead of going down and being a corporate lawyer somewhere, God had a different plan for you.
Well, yes. Once I got saved, I was adamant about finding what's my purpose. What is it that you saved me for? And at the time, I wasn't really clear on it. I was like a typical person. I just wanted to graduate from school, get a job to take care of me and my family, and that was it. But my senior year, I was required to do a paper. I decided to do it on the juvenile justice system. Figured it would be an easy A, in which it was. But the only other requirement was for me to make 8 site visits to some of the facilities. So I chose to go to the same facilities I was incarcerated in because it would be easy. And 3 kids changed my life. 1 kid was young, 14 years old, very charismatic, immediately attracted to him. And eventually I asked him what was he there for. He was there for murder. And the circumstances surrounding that really bothered me because it was a situation that I could have easily been in. He was joyriding with one of his friends that had permission to drive their mother's car. One of the guys jumped out, followed this other guy, and tried to take his car and killed him in the process. And then there was another kid that was 360 pounds, 6'7", and because of his height, they socially promoted him from middle school through high school, and he didn't know how to tell time. But within 10 minutes, I taught him how to tell time, and that really bothered me how many kids were in that same situation. And then lastly, it was this kid that was locked up in another facility I was in, and he told me that his story was he grew up middle class, had all the things he wanted in life, but at 8th grade, he realized his mother was a high-end prostitute. And because of that, he started going to school a little bit late because he was staying up late to avoid her activities. And when he would get to school, they asked him, "Why are you late?" Obviously, he couldn't share. And so he carried that burden with him from middle school all the way through high school. And I was the only person that he had shared his story with. And from that point on, I realized this is something I want to do for the rest of my life, to give youth who may not have that ability to be an advocate for themselves, to be an advocate for them.
Tyrone, there's about 400,000 youth in the foster care system in our country right now, 100,000 of whom are adoptable right now. I think there's probably 10x to 20x children who are orphans but are not in the foster care system. Comment on why you established higher impact and how you're addressing the needs of those kids.
Yeah, you talk about urban orphans, and it's different than we think about orphans, right?
Exactly. Well, one thing I realized from my own experience, you got a lot of kids out here that has a lot of God-given talents. And it's just a matter of whether we're going to go out there and reach them. And I realized I was one of those kids that fell through the cracks. And when I really wanted someone to love me and accept me was really through that middle school through high school age. And so I decided to target that population. And I decided to go after the ones that are high risk, not the ones that are at risk. Because if you think about the Apostle Paul, he was a high risk candidate. I mean, he was adamant about what he was doing. He thought he was 100% right. And he was successful at what he was doing. So we figured if we go after those same kids, middle school through high school, that are leaders, charismatic, but are very successful in doing things the negative way. And a lot of these kids, when I say urban orphans, when you think about a traditional orphan, they lose both of their parents, by circumstances beyond their control. And people come in and take care of them. But when I say urban orphan, what's the purpose of a parent? Parenting. And a lot of our kids may have a parent in a home, but if there's no parenting going on, they're basically raising themselves. But they don't get a lot of the sympathy or the empathy of a traditional orphan because most people assume that they're just being disobedient. They don't want to listen to their parents. And no, actually, they're making more positive choices than their parents. And so we find those kids, acknowledge those kids, and support them. And the dilemma that they're in is this. They can't express everything that's going on in the home because there's two ways a youth can be removed from his home. Something that he does can end up being removed, or something that the family's doing, he can be removed. So most of the kids I work with are not going to tell what their family is going through, whether it's drugs, alcohol, abuse. They're just going to absorb it and just keep moving and try to make the best out of it.
So explain for our audience, both here and on the radio, what the Higher Impact is doing. And we should say that's Higher, letter M, PACT, P-A-C-T,
yes.
right?
Yes, no I in impact.
Got it.
All right. Well, what we do is take these kids, I kind of stole Jesus' model. I work with 5 to 15 of them, long-term mentoring, 1 to 10 years, with a no excuse approach. All we need from the parents is your permission to work with the children. We want to work with them in the environment in which they live, under the circumstances they were born into. And the kids can't move out of our program. So a lot of our kids move 2 or 3 times within 1 year. We will follow those kids wherever they go. And one of our goals is to present Christ to them through our actions. And we just spend a lot of time socializing them and educating them and exposing them to the possibilities in which, in the long run, we're instilling hope and inspiration, and so they can achieve their God-given purpose.
Is it like what Big Brother is doing, but more concentrated?
It's kind of like they were big brothers and big sisters, but it's more of a family approach because some of the kids, depending on their circumstances, they've lived with us. Some of them, one at a time. It's not a group home, but they've lived with us, and it's very sensitive. A lot of the issues that we're dealing with when you're dealing with drugs, gangs, and a lot of violence and things of that nature. And I always tell people, our kids are at high risk of dying and failing. Most of the kids in my program, before they turn 18, they've already lost anywhere from 5 to 10 of their close friends due to violent death. So it is a life and death situation. So it's very tense.
Tyrone, I'm going to give you a giant megaphone right now.
All right.
I want you to speak to this audience here and speak to the audience listening to our broadcast and challenge them to do what you've done. You're in a wheelchair, but you don't consider yourself handicapped or disabled.
Right.
Challenge them to make a difference in the life of a child who's an orphan.
Right. Well, my biggest challenge is, I truly believe that maybe 90% of Christians don't know their God-given purpose, and we're all members of the body of Christ. Find out what your gifts are in the Spirit. I know my gifts: discernment of spirit, faith, and wisdom. Find out what that gift is, but intentionally seek out what your purpose is. We all can do a lot of great things, but God has saved us for a specific purpose, and then pursue that with everything that's in you. Because to me, these kids need us. That's just the bottom line. And it comes with the sacrifice. So often I hear people tell me, well, I got to take care of my own, and before I can take care of someone else. Everything we do, it comes with the sacrifice. But we all know in the long run, it will be very rewarding.
I want you to know, I introduced you as a hero. You could easily be a victim and have a victim's mindset, but you don't. You are a man's man, a courageous man, and I just want to thank you for your courageous faith.
Oh, man. Yes, thank God. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And this concludes our recording of Family Life Today. Thank you all for being a great studio audience. Thank you, Tyrone, for sharing your story with us.
problem.
God bless you. Thanks.